Hey everyone, welcome back. This week we're going to talk about our second big theoretical perspective. Last week was structural functionalism. This week is a big left turn into something called conflict theory. Um, Conflict theory is really easy to grasp at first. Maybe it's more intuitive than structural functionalism. The basic idea of it is that instead of society being an organism, society is really comprised of a bunch of groups that are constantly competing. They're in conflict with each other. What's going to be interesting this week is the details of how that happens. And in particular, the fact that while a lot of conflict theory was established, 40, 50 years ago, there are some new wrinkles that have occurred just within the last maybe 10 or so years that are going to be both really interesting, but also, I think, really kind of unnerving. So toward the end of this week's videos, it's going to be it'll be very interesting to you, I think. All right, but let's start with just our introduction. So, as I said, society is not in structural functionalism. Society is thought of as an organism with all kinds of structures that are different organs, and in a general way, what is produced is order. Conflict theory, because it sees society as comprised of competing groups, whenever you see order, what you want to think is domination. Some group has imposed its will on all the other groups, and that's why we have what appears to be order. For conflict theorists, order just means that one group has won, at least temporarily. Let's see. How do groups win? Karl Marx talked in the beginning, and he sort of is the founder. That probably wouldn't be a huge surprise of conflict theory. And he said, the groups use economic power to try to impose themselves on society and make society shape it the way they want it to be. Max Weber comes along a few years later and says, well, there are other ways, other types of power too. There is the power that is rooted in traditional authority. We've always done things this way, and therefore when I say we continue to do them that way, there's power in that, according to Weber. There's power in terms of a person's strong personal appeal or charisma that can influence people to make society in a certain way. Martin Luther King Jr. is sort of the quintessential example of that kind of charismatic power. We have a system that involves civil rights for all people, largely because even though Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have a lot of economic power and he didn't have a lot of traditional power, I mean, he was a black man in the 1950s and 1960s, and he also didn't have power because of his position. He was a reverend, but that's not a position that people have to follow. It was his charisma that was what ended up helping him to shape society in a different way. And then I alluded to Weber's third type of power, which is rational legal authority, the power rooted in a position, the power that I have over this class. There's nothing charismatic about me. Certainly, there's no tradition to just following middle-aged people who make videos. It's because I have a position in this in the organization of College of Charleston that allows this to happen. Okay, so 4 types of power, and I didn't put those on the board. I'm sorry about that. Economic power, which we get from Karl Marx. Traditional power rooted in culture, that we get from Weber. Third is charismatic power rooted in personality, that we get from Weber also. And fourth is rational legal authority, rational legal power rooted in an organizational position. Okay, let's move along to contrasting this with functionalism again, and let's get down to this term of interest groups. In structural functionalism, the main sort of unit that people are concerned about is social structures and what function a particular structure has that helps the whole be perpetuated. Conflict theorists are not as interested in structures as they are in interest groups. An interest group, you kind of have probably an intuitive sense of this because we talk about interest groups in politics. It's basically a bunch of individuals who form a group that are interested in society being one way instead of another way. They want to set up at least some aspect of society in the way that they want. The National Rifle Association is a great example of an interest group. They are concerned with one aspect of society, the freedom of people to be able to buy whatever type of gun that they want. And they then use different types of power in order to try to shape society so that that will be a reality. That's it for interest groups. Last point is that victories are always, for conflict theorists, always temporary. Nothing is ever fully resolved. So society is this dynamic situation of groups fighting to shape society, and sometimes they win, and then they've shaped society the way they want to, and then other times a different balance of power comes, and those groups lose, and another group wins, and we change the way our society is shaped. I think that's it. That's a record for me for brevity. Okay, so as we transition to the second video, this video basically deals with a general orientation to conflict theory and answers the question of why conflict happens. Why does conflict happen? It happens because different groups or different individuals form interest groups to try to shape some aspect of society the way they want. In the next video, we're going to get into how they do that. We're going to talk about a somewhat famous theory called the 3 dimensions of power by a guy named Stephen Lukes. So, without further ado, I will see you in that video.